I don't remember the exact moment it started, the feeling of being overlooked, of always coming second. Maybe it was the day my younger brother, Ryan, was born, and my parents gazed at him like he was a miracle sent straight from heaven while I, just a 2-year-old toddler, stood forgotten in the background. Or maybe it was later, when Ryan broke my favorite toy truck, and somehow I was the one punished for not sharing. For a long time, I thought this was just how families worked. I convinced myself I was imagining things, that maybe I was too sensitive, reading too much into things that weren't really there. But as I got older, it became impossible to ignore. Ryan was the golden child. He could do no wrong. If he got into trouble at school, my parents brushed it off with an indulgent laugh. Boys will be boys. If I so much as forgot a homework assignment, I'd get a full-blown lecture about responsibility and discipline. If Ryan wanted something, he got it. A new gaming console, a bike, even an impromptu trip to an amusement park just because he was in a bad mood. Me, I had to earn everything. When I turned 12, I asked for a pair of soccer cleats for my birthday. My dad scoffed, saying, "You don't need brand names. What matters is how hard you work." That same year, Ryan threw a tantrum over some designer sneakers he wanted. Guess who got them? For years, I told myself it was just sibling dynamics. Maybe Ryan was just naturally more lovable, more charming, more something. But as we grew older, the pattern didn't just continue, it got worse. At 16, I got a part-time job at a grocery store. I worked weekends and after school, saving up for my own car. My dad, to his credit, matched what I saved and helped me buy a used sedan. I was proud of that car. I had earned it. 2 years later, Ryan turned 16. My parents bought him a brand new car. No job. No savings. Just a shiny new gift with a big red bow. I remember standing in the driveway, watching Ryan rev the engine, my dad clapping him on the back like he had just achieved something remarkable. "A young man needs to drive in style," he had said, beaming with pride. And there I was, standing next to my second-hand sedan, realizing that no matter what I did, it would never be enough. College was the real wake-up call. I had worked my ass off, earned good grades, and landed a partial scholarship to a great school. My parents barely acknowledged it. "That's good," my dad muttered. My mom simply said, "Well, you were always the serious one." Meanwhile, Ryan barely scraped his way into a community college, and they threw him a massive celebration. Full-on party, congratulations cards, and, of course, another expensive gift. This time, a brand new laptop and an upgraded car to help with his commute. Meanwhile, I biked 5 miles to work every day because I couldn't afford gas. And yet, I still tried. Some pathetic part of me still craved their approval. I kept hoping, if I worked harder, if I achieved more, maybe they'd finally see me. Maybe they'd finally be proud. But Ryan, he never had to try. He dropped out of college after 1 semester because he was finding himself. My parents supported him completely. "He's brave," they said. "Not everyone wants to conform to society's expectations." Brave. I was drowning in student loans, working 2 jobs to stay afloat, while my parents bankrolled Ryan's dreams, his failed business ventures, his spontaneous vacations, and his nights out. The worst part? The holidays. Every Thanksgiving, every Christmas, it was the same. I'd walk into my parents' house, and the first thing my mother would say wasn't, "It's so good to see you," or, "How have you been?" No, it was always something like, "You look tired. Have you been working too much?" Meanwhile, Ryan would stroll in late, dressed in whatever ridiculous fashion phase he was into that month, and my parents would light up like he was a celebrity. They'd ask about his latest big plans, his vision, his non-existent business ventures. And me? I was boring. I was predictable. It didn't matter that I was working my way up in a real career, paying off my debts, and building an actual future. Ryan was the one they loved talking about. I remember one Thanksgiving in particular. I had just gotten a big promotion, my first real step into a managerial position. I was proud of myself. I sat down at the dinner table, finally ready to share something good. I barely got 1 sentence out before my mom interrupted me. "Ryan is thinking about starting a podcast." That was it. The entire dinner became about him. his big ideas, his exciting future, his potential. That night, I went home and lay in bed staring at the ceiling, wondering why I still tried. But the truth was, despite everything, I still loved my brother. I hated how my parents treated me, but I never blamed him for it. It wasn't his fault, right? He hadn't asked for the favoritism. He had just benefited from it. So I kept reaching out. I called him, checked in on him, invited him to hang out. And every single time, it felt one-sided. If I talked about my job, Ryan suddenly had an even bigger opportunity on the horizon. If I mentioned dating someone, Ryan would casually bring up his mystery supermodel girlfriend, who, of course, no one had ever met. Everything was a competition. And I never won. I should have seen the red flags. But I didn't. Because no matter how many times I lost to Ryan, I never thought he would take the one thing that actually mattered. I never imagined he would take her. I wasn't looking for her. Honestly, at that point in my life, I wasn't looking for anyone. I had just started settling into my career, working long hours, trying to build something real for myself. Relationships felt like an unnecessary complication. After years of being overlooked by my own family, the idea of letting someone in, of giving them the power to hurt me, wasn't exactly appealing. But then Olivia walked into my life, and everything changed. I met her through Ryan, which, in hindsight, should have been a red flag. She was friends with one of his on-again, off-again flings, one of those girls he kept around for convenience but never really cared about. It was one of those casual gatherings Ryan loved throwing, the kind where he basked in attention while I stood on the sidelines, playing the role I had perfected over the years. But that night, for the first time, someone noticed me instead of him. Olivia was different. She wasn't caught up in Ryan's orbit like everyone else. She wasn't hanging on his every word, laughing at his over-the-top stories, feeding his ego. Instead, she was looking at me. She actually listened when I spoke. And when she laughed at my jokes, it felt real, not like the polite, empty laughter I was used to. I don't even remember who made the first move, but we ended up talking the entire night. Somewhere between the drinks and the conversation, I forgot about everything else, the years of being overshadowed, the family that never truly valued me. For the first time in my life, I felt like I mattered. We started dating, and suddenly, it was like I had stepped into a life I never thought possible. Olivia was smart, driven, and kind. She worked hard, just like I did. She understood what it meant to hustle, to earn every inch of success without handouts. And unlike my family, she saw me, the real me. She noticed the little things. The way I tapped my fingers when I was thinking. How I got quiet when I was upset instead of talking about it. She called me out when I downplayed my accomplishments, something I had spent my whole life doing. "Why do you always do that?" she asked once, after I brushed off a promotion like it was nothing. "Do what? Act like what you've achieved isn't impressive. You worked your ass off for that promotion." I didn't have an answer for her. Maybe I still don't. Because when you spend your whole life being told that your success isn't as exciting as someone else's, when you grow up watching your younger brother get showered in praise for doing the bare minimum, you start to believe it. You start to think that nothing you do is ever worth celebrating. But Olivia celebrated me. She made me feel like I was enough. And I think that's why I fell for her so hard. I wish I could say my family was happy for me. I wish I could say they saw how incredible she was and thought, wow, maybe we should actually acknowledge our older son for once. But, of course, that's not what happened. When I brought Olivia to meet my parents, my mother barely hid her disappointment. "She's very pretty," she said, in that tone that made it clear she was searching for something negative to say. My father barely acknowledged her. Just a grunt, a nod, and then he turned back to the football game. And Ryan was interested. Not in an obvious way. Not at first. But looking back, I should have seen the way he watched her. The way his questions about our relationship weren't the typical "how did you guys meet?" but more like "what do you think she sees in you?" I brushed it off. I was happy. For the first time in my life, I had someone in my corner. Someone who chose me. My family's approval? I didn't need it. I had Olivia. And that was enough. We moved in together after a year of dating. I was nervous. I had never lived with someone before, not like this, but with Olivia, everything felt natural. We built something together. Something that felt like ours. We spent weekends making our little apartment feel like home. Picking out furniture, arguing over paint colors, laughing over takeout on the floor when we were too exhausted to cook. It wasn't perfect. We fought sometimes. I worked long hours, and she had her own career to focus on. But we were a team. And for the first time in my life, I felt like I was part of something real. We talked about the future. Marriage, kids, a house. I wanted it all with her. So on our 4th anniversary, I proposed. Nothing flashy. Just a quiet dinner at home, a heartfelt speech about how she made me feel seen, how I never wanted to wake up without her beside me. She said yes. And for the first time, I thought, maybe this is it. Maybe I finally get my happy ending. We decided on a long engagement. We weren't in a rush. We had our whole lives ahead of us, and we wanted to take our time planning the wedding. I was working more than ever, trying to save up for a house, trying to build a future. Olivia was doing the same. We didn't see each other as much as we used to. But I wasn't worried. Rough patches happen in every relationship, right? I didn't notice the changes at first. The way she was always on her phone, smiling at messages she wouldn't explain. The way she started going out more, saying she needed space, time with her girlfriends. The way she became distant. Looking back, I should have seen it. But I didn't. Because when you love someone, when they're the first person who has ever really loved you back, you don't let yourself believe that something is wrong. You don't let yourself see the cracks forming beneath your feet. Because if you did, you'd have to admit that the happiness you finally found wasn't real. And I wasn't ready to face that yet. I remember the night Ryan congratulated us on our engagement. There was something off about the way he smiled at me. Like he knew something I didn't. Like he was waiting for something. I should have paid attention. I should have known. But I was too busy being happy. Too busy believing I had finally built something that no one could take from me. I had no idea that Ryan had already started working on taking it all. And soon, the life I thought I had, it would be gone. All because I trusted the wrong people. You ever look back on a moment and realize that was the exact second everything started to fall apart? I didn't see it then. I didn't even feel it. But now, looking back, I know the moment it started, the moment the foundation of my life began to crack beneath my feet. It was the night we announced our engagement to my family. I should have expected their reaction. I should have been prepared for the indifference, the backhanded comments, the way my parents always made sure Ryan's life was somehow more important than mine. But even after all these years, I still held on to that tiny, pathetic sliver of hope that maybe, just maybe, they'd be happy for me. I was wrong. The night started with Olivia and me standing in my parents' living room, fingers intertwined, the ring on her hand catching the dim light of the chandelier. I proposed, I said, smiling, waiting, hoping for some kind of warmth. Some kind of congratulations. My mother's face barely moved. Her lips curled into that polite, practiced smile she always wore when pretending to care. "Oh, how nice," she said, like I had just told her we got a new couch. My father barely looked up from the TV. "Good luck with that," he muttered before turning back to whatever game was on. And Ryan grinned. A slow, knowing grin. Like he already knew something I didn't. He clapped me on the back. Hard, almost mocking. "Damn, man. You sure you want to lock it down already?" I frowned. What's that supposed to mean? He shrugged, but the smirk never left his face. "Nothing. Just marriage, you know. Big step. You ready for that?" I ignored him. Because Olivia was happy, and I was happy, and for once in my life, I wasn't going to let my family ruin something for me. I should have known better. The first few months of the engagement were good. Great, even. We started planning the wedding. Nothing extravagant, just something intimate. Something ours. We talked about venues, guest lists, budgets. We looked at houses. We started picturing what the next phase of our life together would look like. And then, slowly, everything started to shift. At first, it was subtle. Olivia started coming home late more often, saying she was meeting up with friends or working extra hours. She was always on her phone, smiling at messages she never shared. She was moody one minute, affectionate the next. distant. Like she was somewhere else entirely. I chalked it up to stress. Planning a wedding is a lot. Work was demanding for both of us. Life was hectic. It was normal, right? Every couple goes through this. I ignored the signs. Because Olivia was the first person who ever made me feel like I mattered. And I didn't want to believe that feeling was slipping away. Looking back, the signs were there. All of them. The way she'd quickly lock her phone when I walked into the room. The sudden perfume on her clothes that wasn't hers. The nights she'd come home smelling like alcohol and cologne. And how she kissed me like she wasn't really there anymore. There was one night that should have made me see everything for what it was. I was in bed, waiting for her. It was 2 a.m., and she still wasn't home. When she finally walked in, her hair was messy, cheeks flushed, shoes in her hand. "Where were you?" I asked. She froze. For half a second, just half a second, she hesitated. "With Emily," she said. Emily. Her best friend. The same Emily who had called me earlier that night, asking if Olivia was home. I should have said something. I should have pushed. But instead, I nodded and let it go. Because when you love someone, you convince yourself of things that don't make sense. And then, there was Ryan. Always around. Always asking about Olivia. More than usual. "How's she doing?" "She seems stressed." "You two okay?" "She's way too good for you, man. You better treat her right." Jokes. That's what I thought they were. But now I know they were warnings disguised as humor. And then one day, I walked in on them talking in the kitchen. Just the two of them. Olivia looked guilty. Ryan. He just smiled at me. "We were just talking about the wedding," he said casually, as if nothing was off. As if I hadn't just walked into a conversation I clearly wasn't supposed to hear. But I let it go. Because Ryan was my brother. And Olivia was the woman I loved. And the idea that something could be happening between them. It was unthinkable. After weeks of feeling like something was off, I finally worked up the nerve to ask Olivia what was going on. We were in the living room. She was sitting on the couch, scrolling through her phone, and I was watching her, heart pounding in my chest. "Olivia," I said. "Are we okay?" She barely looked up. "Yeah." "Why wouldn't we be?" I hesitated. "You've been different." She sighed, putting down her phone. "It's just stress. Work, the wedding, everything. I'm tired, that's all." She reached for my hand, squeezing it. And for a moment, I believed her. But then, her phone buzzed. She flinched. I glanced at the screen before she could flip it over. A name. Ryan. My stomach dropped. I didn't say anything. I just stared at her, waiting. Hoping she'd explain. Tell me it was nothing. Tell me I was imagining things. She didn't. She just picked up her phone, put it on silent, and pretended nothing had happened. I spent the next few months convincing myself that everything was fine. That Olivia still loved me. That Ryan was just my brother. That I was imagining things. I buried the doubt. Shoved it down deep where I wouldn't have to look at it. Because if I did, if I faced the truth, I would have to accept that the life I was building was already falling apart. And I wasn't ready to lose everything. Not yet. But deep down, I think I already knew. I just didn't want to believe it. You ever feel like your whole world is tilting? Like the ground beneath your feet isn't solid anymore? Like you've spent years building something real, something strong, only to watch it crumble in an instant? I do. Because the night Olivia told me she was pregnant was the night my life ended. It was a Wednesday night. I remember because I had just gotten home late from work, exhausted, and all I wanted to do was collapse on the couch next to Olivia and pretend things were normal. But when I walked in, she was already sitting there, hands clenched in her lap, looking like she had just seen a ghost. I barely had time to set my keys down before she said it. "I need to tell you something." Her voice was small. Shaky. I felt my stomach drop. I sat down across from her, my heart hammering in my chest. "Okay." She wouldn't look at me. And then, "I'm pregnant." For half a second, I felt this rush of relief. I smiled. I actually smiled. Because despite everything, The distance, the weird late nights, the way she had been pulling away, I still believed in us. I still thought we had a future. So I reached for her hand, squeezing it gently. "That's amazing," I whispered. "We're going to be parents." And then I saw it. The way her breath caught in her throat. The way her body stiffened under my touch. That's when I knew. That's when I felt the first crack in my world. And then she whispered the words that destroyed me. It's not yours." I pulled my hand away like she had burned me. The room tilted. My ears rang. "What?" Olivia's face crumpled. Tears filled her eyes. She was crying, like she was the victim. "I didn't mean for this to happen," she choked out. I didn't even hear the rest. Because I already knew. I knew before she even said his name. "Ryan. My brother." The words felt like a knife between my ribs. Every breath felt like fire in my lungs. I stood up so fast the chair scraped against the floor. My hands were shaking. Him. My voice wasn't even mine anymore. It was something raw. Something broken. "You, with him." She sobbed harder, rocking forward, reaching for me. I stepped back. Because if she touched me, I might snap. "It started a few months ago," she admitted, voice barely above a whisper. "A few months ago. We were engaged. We were planning our life together. And the entire time, she was sneaking off to be with Ryan. I never meant to hurt you," she continued. Like that meant anything. I laughed. A cold, bitter, empty laugh. "Really?" My voice cracked. "You didn't mean to hurt me?" She flinched. "Ethan, please, don't." I couldn't stand the sound of my name coming out of her mouth. I couldn't stand the sight of her. I turned away, running a shaking hand over my face. This wasn't real. This couldn't be real. I don't remember telling her to leave. I don't remember how long I stood there, staring at the floor, replaying every moment, every sign, every stupid, pathetic time I had ignored my gut. But at some point, I grabbed my phone. And I called Ryan. He picked up on the first ring. "Hey, bro." Like nothing was wrong. Like he hadn't just ripped my life apart. I didn't even think. "You slept with Olivia." Silence. Then a slow exhale. I could hear the smirk in his voice when he said, "Look, man." I didn't let him finish. Because I was already grabbing my keys. I don't remember the drive to his apartment. I don't remember parking. All I know is that I was banging on his door, ready to kill him with my bare hands. When he finally opened it, he had the audacity to roll his eyes. "Really, Ethan? You're gonna make this a thing?" I saw red. I swung. My fist connected with his smug, lying face so hard he stumbled back. He looked stunned. Touched his jaw like he couldn't believe I actually hit him. Then he laughed. "You're overreacting." I hit him again. This time, he went down. And then I heard my parents' voices. They were already there. Of course they were. Of course they were defending him. "Ethan, stop this!" my mother screamed, stepping between us like I was the villain. "You need to calm down," my father snapped, gripping my arm. "This isn't how you handle things." I stared at them. At my parents, who had spent their whole lives making excuses for Ryan. At Ryan, who was now wiping blood from his mouth, still smirking. At Olivia, who stood in the doorway, shaking, arms wrapped around herself like she expected me to feel sorry for her. And that's when it hit me. They would never be on my side. Not now. Not ever. I shook off my father's grip. Stepped back. Ryan grinned up at me. "You're acting crazy, man." I almost lunged at him again. But I didn't. Because I wasn't going to let him win. Not anymore. I turned to my parents, voice shaking with rage. "You want him." My voice was eerily calm. "You can have him." My mother gasped. "Ethan." I cut her off. "I'm done." I looked at Ryan one last time. And then I walked away. I ignored the missed calls. Ignored the texts. Locked my doors. Shut everything out. And when my phone buzzed with a message from Ryan, I knew I shouldn't open it. But I did. Ryan, you'll get over it. Family is family. I stared at the words for a long time. And then, I threw my phone across the room. Because family wouldn't do this. Thank you for visited my YouTube channel. Your support, likes, and comments truly inspire me to create even more engaging content. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. You're a part of this amazing community, and I'm thrilled to share my stories with you. See you in the next video on YouTube.